The stale odour of death and exhaustion hung over Winston Churchill as he slouched over his desk to write in a well-worn diary. It was only a matter of minutes before he was due to parley with the German delegation for the final resolution of the Treaty of Versailles. Winston Churchill found his heart sickening at the thought that his friends went through a torment and humiliation over the last 4 years for what seemed like nothing. His blood boiled that the very winter's day in June the 28th, 1919. Sitting in a hall of mirrors at the Palace of Versailles, Winston reflected that France, England, and ultimately the United Nations, which today we are sickening towards, are conceding to just walk away with a simple payment for damages from the Germans. The stipulations were severe for the Habsburgs and Wilhelm II in particular. Germany had to surrender her colonies, which were awarded various allied countries. She was not even allowed to have a defensive force of arms, and like tanks or submarines anymore. The Rhineland was to be occupied by Allied troops for 15 years and to be permanently demilitarized. Harsh indeed. But, there was even an outcry from Germanic economists at the peace settlement. War guilt, they called it. They want to see an example of guilt of what we're experiencing today. The security for the United Nations has been told it was necessary for him to be present for the signing of the abominable act. He was certain that the Germans would have difficulty paying back the debt that was the wars across Europe had, particularly France, had incurred. Damages of 6.6 billion would take the affair well into the new century. 6 months of negotiations led to this conciliatory atrocity. The might of the British Empire in 1919 was imposed on a system of government that could not even start to effectively pay back war damage until 1921. In the middle of the 21st century, we saw that at the same time the government decided to bow out of the promises made at the start of the office of Prime Minister today, in just 25 days before its second anniversary. The election imposed on an alien country are just a symptom of cowardice and fear similar to that imposed on the German government 100 years ago. Damage that our Prime Minister today has caused England will resonate for far longer than to the economists of Europe, however. Tony Blair said at the time that he said, "I think the real issue is the blank cheque." That's not even counting the fact that he's backing Labour. It will never compensate for the absurdity of the election and legislation that gave rise to DAIs in 1997. Even more disturbing with the realisation of the two-faced contrivances is that the European Commissioner, President Jean-Claude Juncker, and the EU's main Brexit negotiator, Michael Barnier, had dinner with the Prime Minister back in 2017. He said this deep, special relationship had Britain making compromises and negotiations according to the Prosperity UK conference. David Davis said, as a result, that we have very good reason to feel optimistic, with the rest of the EU only considering the UK's withdrawal from the agenda originally established by Britain. We have to wonder whether they're actually giving their own back for our constant subjugation and severity of the past. 1919 also saw the Polish corridor created and the Scar Basin to be administered by the League of Nations until 1935, Britain abandoning them to their fate. It wasn't until 1946 that they were allowed a plebiscite vote. How much guidance do we need to give to Europe, one asks oneself. None, I would say, as they have contributed to their own set of agendas. Indeed, it seems that there are citizens involved in the UK saying, "There's the lake, there's the fish and the rod. Whilst you got on with that, I'll be over here having a fag. And I'll watch. Bye!" With President Zelensky admitting that he doesn't have the military strength to retake Russian territories and insisting on a diplomatic ending to their war, we have to ask ourselves whether we're all surprised given the lack of promises Europe keeps. Even the NHS over here has suffered through the broken promises of £350 million a week, though the health service is only half of the overall problem. It is only after the institution created to rectify the damage of consecutive world wars, now devolved into a devastating crumble after the annihilation of its services, causing the COVID fiasco. Thousands of dead because SAGE, given that the prime concern during the alert was for the preservation of life affected by that of the pandemic, not concern over anyone dying over any other condition, but specifically for those dying of COVID, a setback that also impacted upon schools at the time, learning, people going to work. We have an institution which now actually looks upon working from home as a valid alternative. The kind of governed damage that retroactively destroyed the efforts of previous governments that sought to end devastation rather than cause it. Damages that were caused by consecutive wars against the whole of Europe. For example, Brexit, the divorce bill, is estimated at 50 billion. It's only a small consideration given the amount of money Europe had to fill after its conflicts over 100 years ago. Now today's top 10% of taxpayers own over 51,400, paying nearly twice as much towards the total tax take than their 70s counterparts did. Now, how are we ever to afford to leave anyway? Germany now has a growing problem with inequality and poverty and social unrest, even if you say the wrong thing, rather like us actually to thinking about it. All of this concerning political allegiances. Are we to walk away as we have done in the past too? It might be that we have no choice, as the British coin seems to be in danger of becoming disturbingly undervalued. Fear and mistrust following COVID's wake seems to stalk our land like giraffes on Zimmer frames. As far as our progress financially is concerned, so are we, it seems. And the negotiated damage that left us following the international human rights law in 1997 means that a minority of people living in England are more important than the majority. It comes to something when fictional representatives of our society make more sense than our own government that instigated such negotiated damage. And we find that we all have to remember
the needs of the many outweigh
the needs of the few.
We ask, should Winston read the fine print when he negotiated Versillies?
One moment.
Give us a good clicking.
One moment, damn you!
Shakanaka.